Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
I'm Stephen Carroll, and this is Here's Why, where we take one news story and explain it in just a few minutes with our experts here at Bloomberg. It's a central part of the vision of the European Union, being able to cross borders freely.
Schengen is an example of what it is. You have seamless travel around the Schengen area.
The decision that we have now finally taken to welcome Romania into our common Schengen area was long overdue and highly deserved.
So, dear passengers, welcome to Bulgaria, welcome to Schengen. This is a really historic moment for Bulgaria.
The Schengen area, named after a village in Luxembourg on the border with France and Germany, covers 25 of the EU's 27 member states, along with 4 neighbouring countries, including Switzerland and Norway. It's meant to mean that people can travel between countries in the zone without having to show their passport. But increased worries over migration and terrorism have seen some countries, including Germany and France, reintroduce border checks. So here's why the dream of a borderless Europe could be fading. Our Germany correspondent Oliver Crook joins me now for more. Oliver, a bit of context first of all. How big a deal is the Schengen Agreement?
Yeah, Stephen, I think this is an absolutely foundational idea for Europe, and something that began really as a sort of economic alliance on coal and steel, and that has evolved through the decades to be something much, much bigger, and something that is developing more into a political bloc. And at the center of that is the freedom of movement of people. I mean, this is something that is not just also the EU. This is 29 countries across Europe, and we're talking about an area that covers 450 million people. There is nothing like that in the world. There are, of course, countries that are bigger than that where people can move freely, but there is no agreement like that where you can just move seamlessly without border checks, without customs, without anything between that many countries. And it requires a huge amount of trust, because we obviously know how sensitive an issue immigration is and always has been really through human history. So it's a huge sort of achievement. It's continuing to expand. Croatia joined last year. And, you know, if you live in the UK and you're listening to this, as I did, you will also have had the experience of living in a place with Schengen and then without it. And the contrast is the kind of thing that you don't really necessarily think about until you don't have it anymore.
So who's taking a hiatus then from Schengen, and why?
So most recently and most dramatically, I think, is Germany, which has now put on border checks on all 9 of its land borders. Part of this is due to intense political pressures that there are within Germany, where you have the far right traditionally saying that they don't want any more immigrants and they want to be cracking down. But you're hearing it also from the far left in Germany. It has also been put into focus by the fact that there have been a few sort of terror attacks. One was committed by a sort of asylum seeker who was rejected and not deported. And so this was obviously a very emotive issue here in Germany. There's an extension to some of the border checks that already existed with, say, Poland, the Czech Republic, Switzerland, but it's also been instated since the beginning, since 2015, with Austria. So today they've expanded it to France, Denmark, and to all of the land borders. They say that they've turned back 30,000 people that shouldn't have been entering the country. They're trying to get a little bit of a boost from that, but from the Schulz government, it was a significant step.
Is this a new idea that we would see European countries suspending the rules around free travel and bringing back border controls?
So listen, you get it pretty regularly within Europe. It's always temporary measures, and we should say that the German ones are also technically temporary. There are only 8 countries that are using it right now, and it's generally for a specific reason. Either there's been too many sort of illegal immigrants, or there's some concern over that. Terrorism threat, there's maybe a high-profile event, say the Olympics in France. They did it for that. But also Norway has done it because they're concerned about their critical infrastructure after the war with Russia, and if there could be any infiltration there, so they've imposed them. Of course, there were a great many around COVID, but also this puts into sort of focus for the Schengen area, also the broader Schengen border, and trying to put sort of restrictions there so that you don't get as many illegal immigrants there. And this is why, by the way, Turkey is such a key partner to the EU and to the Schengen area.
Do countries get any blowback from the EU when they take steps like this?
Well, listen, Germany has got a lot of blowback over doing this. It got reprimands from Donald Tusk, one of the bordering countries, in Poland, which has exacerbated some frictions that were already there, basically saying that it's entirely unacceptable, calling for the sort of highest level of discussions over it. You've heard the same thing from Austria, but you've also got a lot of praise from some of the Eurosceptics, from Geert Wilders over in the Netherlands, saying this is great, we should do this in the Netherlands. Orban saying, welcome to the club. And it's very significant because it's a government like Scholz's, who is, of course, a social democrat and who's all the party in their coalition are generally pro-migration. For them to take this step really gives a lot of ammunition to some of the far-right parties.
So as you've mentioned, currently these border controls being reintroduced are temporary measures. What's the risk that these temporary controls become permanent?
Well, this is the thing, is that you can sort of continue to roll them over again and again, so they wouldn't really become really permanent per se. That would obviously have a massive impact, but it's the fear of sort of effective permanence, where you just keep rolling them out into sort of perpetuity. Like we mentioned earlier, there's been border checks between Austria and Germany since 2015, and the question is, will they continue to roll it over again and again and again? Germany's done this for 6 months, and these are 6-month increments, but again, this is a risk that it could go further.
What's the big picture here, Ollie? Is the Schengen area really in danger?
So what I think is really interesting is that the issue of migration, I think, is in some ways a much bigger conversation, and it speaks to really a question at the heart of Europe. And Schengen is kind of a proxy, I think, for a much bigger philosophical question, which is, what is Europe? And that is a question that has been asked since the beginning of the EU over decades. It's taken very many different forms, whether it's a focus on debt, the sovereign debt crisis that we had back in 2010, 2011 with Greece. Now you have it sort of with immigration. And it comes at a time when within Europe you have a lot of Eurosceptical parties that are closer to power than they've ever been in the past, whether it's in France, whether it's in Germany, within Italy as well. You have the sort of the far right there. What is interesting is many of these Eurosceptical parties, though they are closer to power, tend to be somewhat less skeptical, right? Le Pen no longer really talks about Frexit. Even the AfD in Germany, the far right, are not really talking about aggressively campaigning on leaving the EU. They might do a referendum, but these are all questions that were much more active in the past. But I think as time goes on and Europe is confronted with blocs like China and the United States, they're going to have to make a choice of what Europe looks like going forward. And I think Draghi put it very well when he's kind of dealing with the sort of competitiveness question in Europe more broadly. He says Europe faces a choice between exit, paralysis, or integration, and that is really the question that is before Europe today.
Thanks to our Germany correspondent Oliver Crook. For more explanations like this from our team of 2,700 journalists and analysts around the world, search for Quick Take on the Bloomberg website or Bloomberg Business app. I'm Stephen Carroll. This is Here's Why. I'll be back next week with more. Thanks for listening.